had some time in class to work on that. You guys were doing very well with it when I covered it, which was some time ago. What I want to do today is the second half of that section, rational inequalities. And then, because we have had such a long break, on Monday I'm going to go back over both parts of this, and we'll just kind of do a review day for both topics in this section. So, I'm not reviewing what I did last Friday today, but I will next Monday. So, rational inequalities. When we solved rational equations, we would just try to get rid of our fraction. That was our strategy. But there is a problem with that here. I can't just multiply over the x plus 5 and get rid of it. Because if you multiply by a positive, nothing happens. But what happens if x plus 5 is a negative number? What would that do to my inequality? It would flip it. If you have a variable, do you know if x plus 5 is positive or negative? No. So we don't know whether we would flip our inequality or not. So with these inequalities, our strategy is going to change. We can't get rid of the fraction. But we can look at this. If I want this fraction to be greater than 0, greater than 0 means it is positive or negative? Positive. Okay. If you're thinking about a graph, I'm just going to draw just something random here for a second. Could you tell me where that graph was greater than 0? Here and here, right? The only way it can get from a positive to a negative is if you touch 0 in between, right? So what we're going to do is figure out what would make this thing equal 0, and then look at what happens to the signs there. So our first step here is going to be to set the top and the bottom equal to 0. Your assignment tonight is going to be Math Excel, and a couple of the questions are going to say, what's the equation for the numerator? And it's just, you'll type in that x minus 3 equals 0. The equation for the denominator, x plus 5 equals 0. So if we solve this, we get x equals 3 and negative 5. Okay, if you think about that on a number line, negative 5 would be here, 3 would be here. There are a couple different options for how to get the next step. Let's talk about the graph. So go ahead and get out your calculator. Let's graph this fraction. Okay, and we want to graph the original. When you type it in, you need parentheses. So parentheses x minus 3 divided by parentheses x plus 5. Okay, most people I've found kind of prefer just looking at the graph here. The two places where it can change from positive and negative are at the negative 5 and the 3. Before negative 5, is this graph above or below the axis? Above. So it was positive to start. Then between negative 5 and positive 3, the graph is negative. It's below the axis. Okay, after 3, what's happening to my graph? It's above again, so it went back to positive. Alright, if you don't understand how I got this from the graph, tell me now, because I can give you another way to get the positive, negative, positive. Does anybody want to see another way to get those? The other option is, some of you are more algebra minded instead of looking at graphs. You can pick test points. So you would take something smaller than negative 5, like maybe a negative 6. Something in between these, maybe a 0, and something bigger than 3, so maybe a 4. And you're going to plug them in up here and see if you get a positive or a negative. I don't care what the number is, just if it's positive or negative. So if you put in -6, you would have a negative divided by a negative, which is positive. If I put in 0, 0 minus 3 is negative, 0 plus 5 is positive, negative divided by positive is negative. If I put in a 4, 4 minus 3 is positive, 4 plus 5 is positive, positive divided by positive is positive. So you can get it either by picking numbers and plugging them in, or looking at the graph. Is everybody with me to this point? We said we wanted greater than 0. Greater than 0 means positive. So my graph is positive here and here. So to write the interval for your answer, it didn't have an equal to, so no brackets. So what would I write for that first piece? This section. Negative 70 to negative 5. Union, the next section starts at 3 and goes to infinity. With these inequalities, your answer is going to be an interval. Okay, not just a single number. You will get an entire interval. Any questions with this? We're just going to keep practicing these. Here's our second one. Okay, this one is different. What changed? The top doesn't have an x with it, and on the other side of the inequality, it's not 0. For this strategy to work, we have to have a 0 here. Okay, just like when you solve a quadratic, you always have to set it equal to 0. When we solve these rational inequalities, we always have to have the 0 there. So that's going to be my first problem, getting that 0. We can subtract our 1 over. So you have 5 over x plus 4 minus 1 is greater than or equal to 0. To make it like the last problem, I need the 0 on the right, and then I need one single fraction over here. If you want to add or subtract with fractions, what do you have to have? Yeah, we have to get the same thing on the bottom, right? The common denominator. This is like a 1 over 1. If I want to make my denominator match, it needs to be x plus 4. So I'm just going to take this times x plus 4 on the top and the bottom. Just that one piece. So I can distribute my negative. Now, since my denominators are the same, I can make these into a single fraction. So 5 minus 4 would be 1 minus x over x plus 4 is greater than or equal to 0. Now, this is like the last problem. So we're going to pick up where we started with the last one. You set the numerator and denominator equal to 0. So over here I get x equals 1 and x equals negative 4. So then if we think about those on a number line, and I do want to see this when it comes to a test or a quiz. I want to see how you're getting your answer. How many of you liked the graphic way to get the positives and negatives? Okay, how many of you like plugging in numbers? Okay. So whichever strategy you want, if you plug in numbers, you would do something smaller than -4, in between them, and bigger than 1. And you're going to plug it in right here. So like 1 minus -5 would be positive, -5 plus 4 is negative, so that section is negative. 1 minus 0 is positive, 0 plus 4 is positive, so that's positive. 1 minus 2 is negative, 2 plus 4 is positive, so that section is negative. If you graphed it, make sure you use parentheses around top and bottom. We can see it starts out below the axis, so negative, then it's above, so positive, below, negative. So whichever way you want to work it, you'll get the same answer. Now the question is, which answers did I want? Positive. Greater than 0 is positive. Now, equal to means bracket. My graph was positive here, but if I write this, my answer is wrong. Why would that be? Equal to means brackets. Was positive between those numbers. Does anybody see what's wrong with that? Not necessarily. Looking at the original, what can x not be? -4, because it would make the bottom 0. Can you ever have 0 on the bottom? No. So even if I have an equal to, whatever was on the bottom has to get a parenthesis. So this -4 has to have a parenthesis because you can't have 0 on the denominator. Any questions there? So got another. What would be my first step? We have to get a 0 over here, so we'll start out subtracting over the 4. Okay, so I've got my 0. Now I need this to be a single fraction. So I could think 4 is like 4 over 1. To make my denominators match, what do we have to multiply that one by? On top and bottom. So if we distribute the 4, okay, because this was a minus, I'm going to distribute a negative through here. So now we can combine these two fractions. So 3x and -8x give me a -5x. 1 and 12 is 13. Alright, what do we do from here? Set the numerator and denominator to 0. if I think about this, 13 over 5, that's 2.6, so that one's bigger. You know, you can pick test points if you prefer, so smaller than 3/2, maybe a 0. 3/2 is 1.5. This is 2.6, so maybe a 2 and a 3 if you want to plug in. Or look at the graph. When you're looking at the graph or plugging in, you're using this fraction right here. So if I graphed that, I can see it starts out negative because it's below, then it goes to positive, and then negative. I do want to warn you, most of the time these signs are going to switch, but it is possible to have 2 positives in a row or 2 negatives in a row. So just know that that can happen. Alright, which ones did I want? Less than is negative. There's no equal to, so nothing would get a bracket. So it would be negative infinity, 2 3/2, and 13/5 to infinity. Any questions there?
Why would you do positive right there?
Because you have to look at this inequality. Less than, negative, greater than, positive. Other questions? Look at this one. We know our goal, the ideal setup here, is a single fraction on one side and 0 on the other. So my first step is going to be to get both of these on the same side. So can I just subtract that entire fraction over? So we would have 7 over x plus 2 minus 1 over x plus 2 greater than or equal to 0. Do I have to get a common denominator here? Yeah, it's already a common denominator. So we can just subtract the top. 7 minus 1 is 6 over x plus 2. So now I have a single fraction and I have my 0. Then we always set the top and bottom equal to 0. Does 6 ever equal 0? No, so just ignore it. So this time the only x value I get is negative 2. If you like to pick numbers, smaller than negative 2, maybe a negative 3, bigger than negative 2, maybe a 0. If you plug in a negative 3, 6 over negative 1 would be a negative. 6 over 2 is positive. Or if you graph it, we can see the graph starts out below the axis, so it starts negative, then it switches to positive. Okay. To decide which ones you want, you look at this inequality. Greater than means positive. Equal to means bracket. Can I put a bracket on my negative 2? No, because it came from the bottom, and the bottom always gets parentheses. You can never equal 0 on the bottom. So my answer is just negative 2, comma, infinity. why don't you guys take a minute and try to set this one up? Everybody started out on the right track. You subtracted over your 4. That's like a 4 over 1. You need a common denominator, so you multiply this by x minus 3 on top and bottom. The place where I saw a mistake was right here. This is a minus, so what should I do? Distribute that negative. So then 6 plus 12 is 18 minus 4x over x minus 3. Okay, set top and bottom equal to 0. Divide by 4. We have a 9 over 2, which is like a 4.5, and a 3. Whether you graph or you're plugging in numbers, you're using this piece right here. So we can see it starts off negative, then it is positive, and then negative again. Okay, what did we want? It's looking right here. Greater than is positive, so that's this section. Equal to means bracket. Which of these cannot have bracket? The 3, because it's on the bottom. So our answer will be parentheses 3 comma 9 over 2 with a bracket. I'd like to do maybe one last example and then give you guys time to work. So I already have this equal to 0, but what do I need to do? This is like a 5 over 1. I need a single fraction over here before it's going to work. So I have to multiply this by 3x plus 4. So if I distribute my 5, 15x plus 20. This is a subtraction, so distribute the negative. Now we can combine these into one fraction. So 2x and negative 15x is negative 13x. Negative 1 and negative 20 is negative 21. This is the setup we want. We've got a fraction, the inequality, and the 0. So now we set top and bottom equal to 0. Add over your 21, divide by negative 13. I need to know which of these is smaller, so I know which one goes on the left. They're pretty close to each other. You can, how would I decide which one went where? Yeah, just divide them on your calculator and see. Negative 21 over 13, what's that give us? Negative 1.6, and negative 4/3 is like negative 1.3. So the negative 21 over 13 will come first. Then you can pick points or graph it. When you graph, make sure you use parentheses on top and bottom. So I can see it's negative, then positive, and then negative again. Looking here, I wanted less than, which means no equal to, so I don't have to worry about brackets. So my answer is negative infinity to negative 21 over 13, union negative 4/3 to infinity. We have about 17 minutes left. You have a 5-question math Excel assignment, so you've got the rest of the class to work on that and ask questions when you need to.
Can I really drink water? Huh? How did I get my juice, bro?